When the pressure is high and the energy low, that's when your business needs inspiration to change and to grow. It's also when true captains show up. Hi, I'm Mark Francis, and I'm the host of this podcast that invites industry leaders from all over the world to answer the question, who's your captain? When you need to motivate and to mobilize, to develop and enable your team. Whether you are new to being a leader or you aspire to be a captain, this podcast is for you. Welcome everybody to Who's Your Captain? I'm Mark Francis, your host, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Darryl Heffline, who is a father, a leader, an author of a book, which we'll definitely talk about. And especially I'm going to talk to you about being a leader in general, Darryl. So you're very welcome.
Yes, thanks you so much for having me here on the call today, Mark. Look forward to our time together.
I'd love to start. We're definitely going to move on to your book, by the way, which I can see behind you there, Shifting Gears.
Yep.
We're definitely going to talk about that. I'd love to get your perspective. You've been leader in many different roles in your life, not least CEO of a mid-sized manufacturing business in the United States right now. What's your perspective on leadership, Darryl?
I think leadership's all about communicating vision and rallying a team of people around that vision, translating it into mission, and then taking a servant approach to leadership. It's not command and control. It's about removing barriers, collaborating, working with folks to get there. To me, when I think about leadership and effective leadership, I think about it simply in terms of servant leadership, communicating vision and mission.
Now, this is fascinating because I've had the pleasure of looking at your website and of reading your book. And I've gleaned from that research this lovely self-perspective that you had that said there was a moment in your career when you were leading a team and your style naturally was command and control, and leader does the telling and the led do the doing. And you got some feedback that said maybe there's a better way. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I was early in my career. I was doing what I thought was right. I didn't have a lot of great models ahead of me. I was kind of learning on the run. And, I thought as a leader, I had to be right about everything. I had to know all the answers, had to be command and control. That's the way it's done, right? If I say it, you better do it, and then we'll be fine. And if it doesn't work, then it's my fault. But it wasn't farther from the truth what I need to be doing as a leader. And I did have a friend who was also the director of human resources at the business at the time pull me aside. He said, "You know what, Darryl, I know you know this, and I know you feel it, but you're messing up." Now, he didn't use the word messing. He used a different term that was, not necessarily for family-rated audiences. He says, "You're messing up, and if you don't fix your approach, you're not going to be here a year from now, to have these problems. You'll be doing something else." And it wasn't a threat. He was a friend, but it was a concerned friend. And he said, I did have to change. And it was hard for me to hear that feedback. But when I heard the feedback, I did internalize it. And then I began to work on 4 things he told me to work on. He told me to do. And he said, if you do these 4 things, you'll turn your style around, you'll develop the relationship, collaborate, trust will build, and you'll be an effective leader. And I guess, can I go into a couple of those here?
Please do. I'm going to take notes. Yes,
this is what he told me, and I've never forgotten it since then. It says, number 1, you are not vulnerable. Your team sees you as somebody who sees themselves as perfect. You have no flaws. And we all know that you're not perfect, and you do have flaws. So that creates distrust, or lack of trust in your team. Number 2, your team doesn't feel like you're approachable, that they could come and talk to you. If they've got bad news, they need some help resolving a problem, they don't think they can come talk to you because you're going to come down on them. You're going to fuss at them in Southern U.S. terms, and they're a little bit afraid of you, to be honest with you. The 3rd thing is that you're not patient. You don't give people time to fail. You don't give them time to check and adjust. If what they're doing doesn't work and they don't hit the plan, you're all on top of them. This is just not the way to build the relationship. And then the 4th thing, which was the most impactful to me, is that they don't think you care. Empathy. Wow. You don't have it. You're not an empathetic leader, and you don't care about them.
Wow.
It was
Darryl,
a blow.
I'm going to play this back. Let me play this back.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
For people listening.
Yep.
Vulnerability.
Yes.
So don't show that you're perfect, or don't behave as though you know everything. Show vulnerability and sometimes say, hey guys, I don't know, or can someone help? So vulnerability, approachability.
Yeah.
So don't be on some sort of pedestal that no one can reach. Patience. And when you said that, I was thinking, yeah, I've got some work to do. And the last one was empathy and genuine show you care rather than you only care because they're doing a job for you.
It's true. You got them right. I call it, I have a little acronym in my mind. It doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but I say VAPC, vulnerable, approachable, patient, concern, or empathy. That's what I've always known. And they became, those four principles became what I now call the 4 pillars of trustworthy leadership. It's on my website. And in leadership discussions, coaching, mentorship sessions, I talk about the 4 pillars of trustworthy leadership. Now, there is a rest of the story to that. And if my team, I was a first-time supervisor rotating on shift in a large consumer products paper manufacturing early career. It was a great opportunity. It was a tremendous honor to be able to do that. And I was failing, but here's what happened. I began to work on those things. It didn't happen overnight. It took some time to change because I had to change my style. I had to change my behavior. And I, like other people, find it difficult sometimes to change, but I did. And what I noticed over time is that the trust began to build in my team as I showed them I was vulnerable. How did I do that? I admitted mistakes. In a meeting, if I was asked for something or I didn't know, I'd say I didn't know. Let's find out. We'll work on it together. Something happened, I allowed them to come talk to me. There was no ramifications for failure. The patience, I sat back, and if they failed, it's okay. Let's figure it out. We'll learn from it. And certainly concerned, I began to have breaks with them and lunches with them and get to know their family. So over time, trust built and change occurred. And would you know it? I mean, this is like a textbook ending. My team, which was last in terms of safety, quality, delivery, cost, and engagement, the key metrics of a manufacturing firm.
Last at everything.
We were bottom, which is why my friend had to come talk to me. And by the end of my journey, and it never ends, by the way, but far enough into my journey, we were first. And it wasn't anything I did. Well, it was something I did. I got out of the way, and I learned these principles, and the principles took over for self. So I love to tell that story. Thanks for opening the door, but I think it's a great story for anybody at any level of leadership to understand.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because it's certainly in my upbringing, and you and I are similar ages. In my upbringing, being a leader was about being tough and strong and knowing the answers. It was almost like father to child relationship where you do what dad says. Mm-hmm. And it's actually, as you just beautifully described, not really a smart way to help engender confidence, ownership, a passion for what people do, unless they have a particular passion. So I think it's incredibly powerful. I'd love to talk to you about you're a recent CEO of a mid-sized business in the US with manufacturing sites across the US. I've Googled the company, really cool, 90-year history. 60 days in, I think, Darryl, I'd love you to reflect on that. What's your first 60 days been like as a leader?
Well, it's been fantastic because, as you mentioned, it's a 90-year-old company, very strong, good brand, great culture. I would say it's it is the best company I've ever worked for. And I've done a lot of private, public, large company, small company. I've done my own entrepreneurial ventures, startup from ground zero to $14 billion a year public companies. And it's the greatest company I've ever worked for. And it's greatest because of the culture that I found when I got there. And it has good product, good brand, good presence in the place. The first 60 days, in the role has been all about building relationships. The 4 pillars of trustworthy leadership. As a new leader in a new company, as I would do in any role that I had, I felt it was necessary to build relationships immediately. And that's not just a gimmick to say, well, I'm going to build relationships so we can get things done. No, it's about being genuine. It's about being that servant leader, and it's about learning the people that you're working with, connecting with them on a personal and professional level, and start to build that relationship. And as that builds, then trust builds. And that's what I've been doing for, the first 60 days. I was in a prior assignment with this company leading into this, and did the same thing over the entire 2-year period that I've been here.
How did you win over the tenured people? So this is a brilliant privately owned business, family owned originally, I believe employee owned now, which is really, really cool. How did you win over those long-termers that have been around in the business for many years, decades even, and yet in comes the new guy? How did you win those over to say, we could do things even better, actually?
Well, there's really two things I'd like to say to that. Number one, I don't know that in this or any company, when you are a new leader in an organization, that you ever completely get to a finish line where you've won them over. I think that's a continuous process, not only in business, but in life. My marriage, I work hard every day to re-earn, my wife's trust, affection, attention, and I work hard to build a relationship. She does the same thing for me, and it's the same thing in business. So I don't know that we actually get to a place where you've reached a termination point for it, but I think it's a continuous event. And I do think it's a matter of just reaching out and finding ways to connect and spending time. It's natural human relationships, spending time together where you're not pressured, where you're not under a deadline and you're not behind on a project, and you set aside the normal pressures, and you take time to get to know each other personally and professionally, and then so those are the things that help, whether they're folks that may have been there a long time, or even folks that maybe have joined the company recently. The approach is the same to each group, and that's just allowing those relationships to build and trust to build as you really get to know each other. And once they learn you as a leader, and they see that you're not coming down on them, and you're not commanding control, and you're not vindictive, and you're not manipulative, and you're not just there to for personal gain, none of which makes up my makeup as a leader, then I think that's where barriers come down and you start to build those relationships.
So thank you. And I'm getting a lovely message around, there's a big part of this about who you are and how you are as the leader, not just what you talk about or the tasks you're looking to lead. And there's also this piece about invest time in your teams, your people, rather than just in the task. So that's a really big message that's coming over. So in that sense, what is the vision for the business now? 90 years in, employee owned now, which is just an awesome thing. What's the vision in the next, 5 to 10 years, or next 90 years even?
Well, I think it's as it would be with every role that I've filled over my last 40 years. I've done 30 projects and/or businesses over. I literally counted them, and they're not necessarily 30 different jobs. It's like I can't hold a job, but 30 different roles and projects and/or businesses across the year, and it's the same thing. It's trying to take advantage of the core of what made this company successful, and what made those companies successful and those projects successful, and then together as a leadership team, leverage the skills and capabilities of the individuals as well as the skills and capabilities of the company going forward, in order to establish a collective progressive attainment of worthwhile goals. What is the vision? What do you want to be in a year, in 3 years, in 5 years? And then once that's established, then you can start to chart out a path on how to get there. And it gets back to your earlier question about building trust and winning over both established, entrenched individuals as well as new individuals, using that servant leadership approach. Once that's established, then you can set these forward-looking goals, and you can determine where we want to go and when we want to get there and how we want to get there.
So how do you know that you're on the right path? Because I got a lovely clear vision there around, we're just going to keep going because we've got such a great platform. We want to be as great in 90 years as we were 90 years ago and we are now. Brilliant business. So keep going, but also continually improve. That's the big vision. How do you know? How will you know that you're on the right track, that progress is working?
Yeah, it's all about milestones. It's about milestones agreed upon milestones, and then specific metrics on how you get there. In the book, I talk about the 5 essential steps to build a compelling case for change, and it is a platform that I've used, all across my career. In the book, I talk a lot about personal life and career development, but it applies to new business startups or existing business turnarounds, exits, whatever, as well as career. But the 5 essential steps are appropriate. It's understanding there's a need for change or desire for change. Number 2, it is stepping back and assessing all of the current, what else is happening in the current state, good and bad. What's making up, things that are contributing to the need for change, things that are maybe not contributing toward it. Then number 3, it's understanding the future state and what does that future look like. And it's a function of whatever any leadership team would agree on, collaborate with, and align with. And then the 4th step is mapping out a path to get there. And this gets back to specifically to the current question that you have to me on the table. How do you know you're successful? Because once you mapped out that plan and you have agreed upon high-level milestones with actions and supporting sub-actions underneath it, that becomes your litmus test, your milestone, your roadmap to determine, are we on track and are we not? And if we're on track from a time perspective, are we also delivering the results that we have? And then just to close out the 5-step discussion, there's a 5th step, and the 5th step is make the right choice. And that comes into play when the team measures out more than one path, because oftentimes there are more than one path to a desired future. And then that becomes an additional engagement opportunity with the team, is determining which is the right path. It's milestones and metrics along the way.
I love this because it just reflects what I believe, right? And as a leader myself and as a consultant, what you've just shared is what I believe. It's really cool expressing those 5. It also is a lovely segue into your book in more detail, because you talked about the 5th step is make a choice. And that's really what shifting gears is all about, isn't it? That at a given point, and I know that some of the great storytelling you do, so I'm thinking about a truck driver who misses his turn and has a choice, as we all do as people who drive cars. Do I actually not worry about it and carry on and then just arrive later? Or do I try and rectify that mistake? And in the case of the truck driver, Jim, I think, has to reverse in a way which is simply dangerous and has consequences. So I'd love you to tell us more about shifting gears as a book, please.
So I wrote the book because I felt a need to describe some of the experiences that I observed throughout my 40 years of career. And what I realized is that, especially with people, when people get into life change and career change and business change, oftentimes they find themselves in the middle of a situation they didn't plan for. It was an unknown disruption. Sometimes they see it coming. Sometimes it's proactive, but rarely. And so Shifting Gears is a book about how to handle disruptions in your life, in your business, your career, and your ministry, when life and business and career and ministry throw you curveballs. And how do you turn that curveball? How do you turn that disruption not to a setback, but a setup for success? And this is not a motivational book that has no basis. And it just tells fluffy stories, or I do tell some stories to make it relevant and real and something that readers can connect to. But it really is an inspirational roadmap, because in the book, I outlined some specific frameworks and processes, step-by-step processes. There's downloadable tools that people can use to help find their way through these disruptions. Ted, you mentioned Ted. He was the one who was driving the truck. The story of Ted becomes the metaphor that it carries throughout the book. And, that was a great example. As he was operating that truck that day, he had 2 choices. He could, and now that he saw the disruption and the need for change, by the way, that's step number 1 in the 5 steps to build
understand the need to change.
Yep, understanding the change, the steps for change. The problem was he really didn't understand it. He saw it and he recognized it, but he didn't want to change. And so he backed up in traffic and he ran over a car. There's a spoiler alert.
In his blind spot, wasn't it?
In his blind spot.
Yeah.
In his hurry, in his refusal to change, he backs up. He didn't see the car. No one was injured, fortunately, in the story, but it could have been. It could have been really bad. And so it really is a book about making sure that not only do you see a need to change, you recognize it, and then you action it. And Ted's example is a great metaphor for the book on what happens. And his big failure is that he didn't want to change.
Yeah, I'm just going to reverse and take the consequences.
Yes,
so
sir.
It leads nicely, Darryl, to this wonderful. You've got four R's, and that I'd love you to talk about the 4 R's of this. How do you manage the transition? I guess. Tell us more about the 4 R's.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, because that's the other powerful framework that I talk about in the book. There's 4 phases to transformation. One, and the first one, and the most difficult, and the one I talk about the most in the book, is reposition. You know, when Ted recognized, or didn't in his case, the real need to change, eventually he did have to do something, okay? And he had to move the truck from where it was to where it needed to be to get back onto a path to conclude his routes. And, you know, that's like us. If a business fails, or if we properly exit a business, start a business up, if we go through a project, you know, we often have to, or in our careers, we have to go from where we are to another place, because that place that we go to is going to better position us to achieve our future goals, our capabilities, skills, dreams,
So
wishes,
number
so on
one
and
is
so forth.
reposition.
It's reposition.
Number one is reposition, and that sounds to me quite mental. It's a mental repositioning of your goals, yourself, your intention, your behaviors.
It is. It is. And, you know, it gets back to, you know, you talk about it in your book, The Captaincy, about, you know, cognitive reframing, you know, and shifting your thought process and seeing the same event, but seeing it differently and different terms and responses. I love what you talk about in that part on the book. And I think it pulls right into the metaphor of Ted, or then later we see Jim, the entrepreneur, who also faces a wake-up call in his business. But, you know, it's all about that reposition. It's a mental shift. It's a mental change. It's a cognitive reframing that has to occur in that step, which is what makes, I think, repositioning so difficult.
Yeah, and so repositioning is the first R. And then, am I right in saying rebuild is number 2?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
So once you move from here to here, and by the way, if you're here, you might be on a curve like this. I'm going to use hand gestures on the call today.
Like it.
This
Yeah.
might be your curve. But in reality, you know, your true potential might be not here, but up here.
Yeah.
This curve is not going to get you there. Notice the curve is still slightly pointing upward. So in some cases, many people may not be failing. They may be kind of getting along and meandering, and in some cases they're flat and maybe they're going down. You know, they could take any one of these forms. But once you reposition, you go from this curve and maybe you go to this curve. Okay. Notice my elbow went down and I'm underneath where the elbow was. I had to reposition. Sometimes repositioning is taking a step back. But you do that because your endpoint is a lot higher and farther and more advantageous to you than the endpoint would have been originally. And that's where rebuilding comes in. Once you reposition, you get on that lower curve. Now you are ready to begin to rebuild the things that you just repositioned, whether it's your career or your reputation, or it's a business or a ministry, or maybe it's a family or a relationship. You know, sometimes people have to exit an unhealthy relationship, and it's painful to do that. But once they do, it doesn't stop. That's not the end. It really is the beginning, and rebuilding is sort of the beginning of that new journey that you take in shifting gears in the crossroads, and then rebuilding is just building back up to build up momentum.
It's really cool, this, and I hope it's encouraging people to buy your book, because it's so fascinating and it's so real, and that you can use it, right? This is usable information. You chose a very interesting verb for the number 3R, which is re-emerge. Help me understand that. That's a fascinating verb.
Yeah, so if you rebuild, when you rebuild, and you do it long enough, and time is a little bit relative. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's long. Just depends on where you are in your cognitive reframing and mindset repositioning, rebuilding, but eventually you rebuild enough and then you get to reemerge. Reemerge is the place where you reemerge beyond where you would have been had you not changed your curve. So remember, this is our original curve.
You've definitely moved.
You've
You
moved.
have definitely moved. Yeah.
Yep. This is our original curve. And then, now this is our new curve. Okay. Our elbows down here, this point where my two arms are intersecting, that's your reemerge. And now you're reemerging. You're beyond where you would have been in your regular curve. It's kind of it's a less empiric. In the book, I have a graphic image that shows a lot better than me fumbling around with body parts on the
I think
podcast.
it's pretty good. It's intriguing, and the final part is realize, and that of course is realize the ambition, realize the original vision and mission that you first of all talked about. So that's completion, as it were.
It is.
When I read your book, it felt like it was really the beginning of those transitions. It focuses heavily on this reposition and rebuild. So are there more books in the offing? That's my question.
Yeah. So the answer is yes.
It's great.
I spend a lot of time on reposition. And originally when I wrote the book, I was going to make it about repositioning, and then each step of each phase was going to have one. But, I did some focus group work, and people that were reading it said, we love the book. We love the concept. But we want to see it in context. We want to see the whole journey. We want to know what happens. You don't have to go into detail, but just show. In this case, I do tell the story of Jim, because Ted sets up the structure of the story, and then Jim is really the entrepreneur that we follow most throughout the book. And I said, well, we want to find out what happens to Jim. Does Jim go through reposition? Does he go through rebuild? Does he go through reemerge and realize? And where does Jim end up? So I provided context. So I do show all four phases. I go heavy in reposition, a little bit less heavy in rebuild, then reemerge and realize are just contextual and just tell more of the story, and how do you as an individual or I as an individual know when we get, because part of what I provide is a tool to tell you what each stage looks like and things that you can evaluate in your life in order to determine when you move to each phase, and how do you know you're in rebuild, and how do you know you're in reemerge and realize. So I give a tool. It's downloadable for folks to use in their own lives and customize it to their journey. But people want to know what happened to Jim. So the desire to know about the rest of the story and what happened to Jim drove me to do all four phases. But there will be other books.
Excellent.
There's going to be, other ones that delve maybe into the phases a little bit deeper. And then there's another book that I have on the drawing board right now that talks a little bit about, setting up an age of acceleration for folks that are deep into their careers.
And I know that because you mentioned it when we were chatting before, and I did on LinkedIn today. I did a short video where I said I've been chatting to Darryl. And at our age and stage in life, when our age begins with a 6, you've got a choice. This came from you. Do you slow down? And do you decelerate? Or do you accelerate? And I did that little post. I was at the top of a mountain just about to ski down it. So I just said, I've chosen accelerate. Pulled my goggles back on and down we went. So that was the realized bit, I think, hopefully.
Probably a little bit of everything all at once right there, but certainly definitely realize. So. Yeah,
I think so. Now I'm going to pivot because I think it's a great time. We've spoken for about 25 minutes now on very much about the leader, with a big focus on how does the leader optimize themselves? How do they change, reposition, realize? I'd love now to pivot to say, how does the leader impact others? So how do you mobilize after 60 days as CEO? How are you mobilizing your resources to get them motivated, focused, and on track on the milestones and the mission? What's your key way to mobilize your resources?
Investing in them, investing your time, my time as leader in the individual, in other leaders, and then in leaders. One thing that I do in every role that I'm at is I try to meet as many people as I can, as often as I can.
Can I ask very specifically, Darryl, I've never been a CEO, so it's from a pure fascination. You've got so many things that happen without your control because you have a large number of people you're responsible for, 5 factories across the United States. So things happen on a daily basis that cannot be prepared for, and the CEO has to get involved. So your time is pretty precious. How do you make sure you evenly invest in all of your people? How do you make that work?
It's hard. It is because, there's a lot of different functions within a business, and each one has their unique set of challenges on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. When you're an executive in a company, I think that you have to make sure that you stay focused on the long-term vision, the long-term goal, and then you eventually have to break it back though to what you do every day. I try to spend at least 20% of my time connecting with people, and it's at all levels in the organization. In our factories, I try to travel and walk the floor and meet anybody who will speak to me. When I go to factories, and I've done this in all 40 years of my career and 30 different projects in all these different companies, I just go out and talk to folks. I meet folks where they are, and I listen and I understand, not as a gimmick to get from them, but to really, it gets back to 4 pillars of trustworthy leadership, to be approachable and concerned and empathetic and really understand what they're challenged with on the day-to-day basis, and then see how I can become part of the solution with them. Not necessarily go fix the problem for them, but how can I raise visibility and awareness, and how can I advocate for the folks? So it's about 20% of the time, and it's meeting directly with face-to-face with employees, with suppliers, with customers, and it's just building those relationships. And this role that I'm in now is no different than any other role I've been in before, and using those principles to build those relationships and connect with people.
I love that, and I'm going to use ChatGPT to just play some words back about what makes you special. So this is a lovely thing that I commend to anybody, that when you're about to speak to someone, like your good self, Darryl, go into ChatGPT and say, here's the name and the position. Usually it helps for them to know exactly who you are and what makes you special. So this is what ChatGPT say makes you special. Credibility through experience. Connects fast and deeply. Now that's a really cool bit of feedback given your philosophy on invest in relationships. It's paying dividends. When the noise fades, Darryl leaves people, and these are the outcomes, steadier, sharper, and more committed.
Wow. First of all, thank you for that tip. It's a great tool, and I will now use that shamelessly in my journey going forward. It's amazing. I agree with everything it said, and my hope is that it translates beyond that into what people would say. What would the people of my current company say? Would they say the same thing? The places where I've been before, that's the true measure of, I think, of a leader's servanthood and capability is what do the people say that work for you? I would hope they would say that. I love everything about it because it's what I'm trying to be. It's what I aspire to be. I don't think I've arrived. So a couple of things about being a CEO. Again, I've not been in that position myself, so I'm fascinated by some of these answers. What would you say, and it might be a generic answer, what would you say is the biggest challenge of being the ultimate boss of a good-sized business? What's the biggest challenge being a CEO? I think it's about vision. Vision and long-term vision and direction of the company. And you're right, this is maybe more a general answer, but it's what I do in this role. It's what I have done in other C-suite roles, and then other leadership roles that weren't necessarily C-suite that led me to this point. But it's about creating vision or leveraging the vision and capabilities of the company, the organization, the team, the people, the individuals, and making sure that the vision is declared and clear for everybody to see, written down. I like a written vision. I like a written mission. A lot of people say, "Oh, that's just fluffy stuff. Don't, what are you spending time on that for? That doesn't deliver results." And while it may not deliver tactical results, if it's properly communicated, I talk in the book about having things defined, documented, demonstrated, and distributed, the 4 Ds of process. If it's defined, documented, demonstrated, and distributed, everybody knows and understands it, then it becomes a motivating factor and a driver to them in their day-to-day business. But, then there's practical things. You have to look at the market, and you have to understand what's happening in the marketplace, and what is the competition doing, and what are breakthroughs, and are there technological things that are on the horizon that could be significant? You look at the Porter 5 forces and in some cases, and a lot of things, but those are all strategic things that I would look at in any CEO role, because I think it's important that there's somebody that is looking out and then translating some of that back into internal discussions in the company.
Yeah, do you know, it really triggers with me the point of difference between managing and leading, because you can be a really good manager and not be a leader at all. You can get things done, you can manage resources, you can hit targets. But a true leader, as you describe it, I think takes people to a better place, enhances, makes a difference, leaves a legacy. And without vision, you cannot do that. You don't drive any change, actually. You continue to manage, possibly really well, but you're not taking your company, your people, the environment to a better place. And that's what vision does do.
Yeah,
so
and I think we've all worked for people that were driving managers, maybe a little bit command and controllers, people that could get things done. But if you get things done and leave a wake in your journey, you might have some short-term success, but what do you really have for the long term? My vision, and I talk a little bit about vision development in the book, I wrote a vision statement for myself, and you'll see it because I do share it in the book, and Jim, we talk about Jim writing a vision statement. But my vision is to be a builder up of people, helping people get from where they are to where they have the potential to be. That's my vision. My mission is, how do I do that vision? By teaching, by writing, by modeling, living by example, by mentoring. Those are what drives DJ, some people call me Darryl personally, and that's what drives what I do on a day-to-day basis as a leader in any company that I've been with.
Yeah, it's great. And I'm just wondering now, in terms of big questions, one of the things I talk about in the captaincy is a questioning skill called high gain questions, where you use a superlative word like biggest, best, to help really push the brain of the person trying to answer it deep. And so I'm going to ask you 5 of those. They're 5 high gain questions.
Yeah.
And it's in any context as a leader, Darryl. This could be you in your ministry. This could be as a mentor, coach, an author, CEO. You decide. But as a leader, that's the context. As a leader, what is your biggest hope for the future?
I think it's continued growth. And by growth, I mean a lot of things. I think it's growth in relationships. I think it's growth in the book. I talk about the 4 foundational building blocks of life: faith, family, fitness, and finances. Mm-hmm. I think those are the 4 critical elements of any leader's life, of any individual's life. And when you measure success, it has to be measured across those 4 foundational blocks, and how well they're balanced and how productive and fruitful we are. If I'm a financial genius and my family goes to heck, and my marriage fails and my kids don't like me, and I lose my health, and what do I really have? So the biggest thing that I look at going forward is the balancing the 4 F's as a leader in me, and helping the people that I mentor and that I work with have the same balance. And then what concerns I have is anything that violates or threatens those things. It's something I'm going to help run interference for and resolve. But balance in the 4 F's is key for any leader. And I think that's part of what I look at in the future. One of the things I try to manage as leader, CEO, VP, director, whatever my role is, I try to balance those things in me and help do that in others, and then trust goes up.
Thank you. Great answer. Biggest concern in this wonderful journey of visionary leadership? What's your biggest fear or concern?
My performance, my failure. Can I be worthy of whatever role I'm given, and can I execute the details of the role? Can I be a contributor to someone's success? Can I help people? You know, can I keep myself, my frailties and flaws out of the way, so that I can execute my vision and mission, and I can help and impact others? I think it's a battle everybody faces. I'm 40 years into this journey, and I can tell you one thing, Mark, I haven't arrived yet. I'm still on the journey, and every day I want to get my best and be my best so I can help others be their best.
Really cool. Most pressing gap, and that could be very personal, it could be organizationally. What's the big gap you want to fill?
So I think personally, it's balancing the four F's very carefully. I as an individual, I'm now an empty nester. I had two kids. My daughter's married. She's been away, for some time. Has kids of her own now. My son just graduated.
Very
Thank
cool.
you.
Yeah.
Big milestone.
Cool.
That's going to be a big change for me, and that's part of what I want to balance. What does that mean for me? I don't know what that means for me. That is new. It is new. So when you look at the F, we're empty nesters, and the family F, faith is important to me. Ministry. My wife and I host small groups in our house several times a week. We try to pour into people's lives, and we try to, and I want to make sure that we're still capable and able to do that, and to do it successfully and to help others. We get nothing from it. We don't charge anything. It's all about building relationships and helping others as they help us, and it's a mutual benefit. I want to maintain my health. I love to eat, and you mentioned the 6 number before. We have that in our age, at the beginning of our ages, and remaining healthy and fit and able to have high energy and balance those things. And the last thing is finances. It's career. I want to be successful in my career, and I want to manage the resources very carefully. Is retirement eventually? I don't ever see myself fully retiring, so it's really balancing all 4 of those elements and how it's impacting me and my family as we go through them. That's the biggest concern I have right now, is how do I balance all this stuff and be successful?
Yeah, it's big. It's really big. And the final high gain question is around succession planning. And so many of the businesses I work with are good at managing the now and driving growth and all the wonderful things we've talked about. And then I say, who's a credible successor for the CEO and the COO and the marketing officer, etc.? And they go, oh, well, yeah, we don't really have any. So in terms of succession planning, what would you say is your biggest goal in terms of your business now?
So I think it's a multi-year process. I do think that there is talent in the company that can develop and succeed me, and quite frankly, all the other executives have their own succession plans, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, is making sure that I invest enough of my time in individuals to prepare them and give them professional experiences, cross-functional experiences that gives them the breadth of knowledge they need to go higher in an organization, and then also help them develop personally. We all read books, and I ask everybody to read leadership books. They're going to be reading The Captaincy, and I'm going to put that on the list, and we're going to go get that one. And hopefully they read Shifting Gears into Crossroads, not because I wrote it, but because they see it as value, and they want to understand the 4 phases of transition, because we do use those principles in our day-to-day business. But there's folks there, and I've got to keep investing in people. both inside the company, personally mentoring, as well as giving them functional experiences. Maybe there's even some outside the company training and education folks need to get, executive education and management or enrichment courses. But I think all those things factor into it. And you mentioned the Curry Company, but I would also bring it back into the greater context, because any role I've been, leadership role, and I've been in a lot of senior leadership roles across my career, it's the same. It's investing in people, giving them the right exposure, giving them cross-functional experience. You take a manufacturing guy and put him in supply chain, or take a supply chain person in and put him in IT for a while and let him run a project, or crazy things like that. I've done that over my career just to get him functional and then get him extra company experiences. All that works together.
Yeah, my top tip on succession planning for any leader is the 3 E's, which is exposure, which you talk about. It's education and it's experience.
I'm writing those
you've
down.
You've got to give people different experiences if they're going to grow. You've got to give them exposure to big decisions and decision-making processes. And you've got to educate them as well. You've got to have a determined development approach so that they get better. They don't just deliver in their day job. They get better so they can do the job above if they want to.
So one quick question, I'm flipping one back at you. In your experience, the companies that you've worked in, advised, mentored, coached, what percentage of those companies do that well?
Oh, it's very low. I would say 10%. You have a number of the bigger ones. I work with big corporations that have a succession plan strategy, but actually when I say who are the 2 credible successors for the CEO, for the COO, etc., they don't have them. They say we've got a succession, we've got annual appraisal, succession planning, but we don't have it tangibly ready. It's more theory than practical. So maybe 10%.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that's based on my unempirical history and a quick count in my head. I think it's very low. Yeah, and even
you manage the now.
Because people don't do well at planning that. Just like, when people talk about disruption, my research showed just about 20% of people have a contingency plan in place if their career lets them down, if their business lets them down, if what they're doing right now lets them down. Only 20%. That's largely measured by financial resource accumulation and savings, and do they have enough to sustain a disruption? Hard to find some data and statistics, but 10-20%, that's pretty low. You would wish it would be 70 to 80% on the other end of the spectrum.
Great leaders have got to write their succession plan right. That's the point.
That's so true.
I'm going to finish, Darryl, with a top tip, and then I'd love to hear your top tip for captains. Who's your captain? And the idea being, if you're not the captain, you need to delegate to someone else, hence succession planning. My top tip to anyone listening into the podcast is buy Shifting Gears, the book by Darryl Heffline. Darryl is 2 R's, Heffline is 2 F's. It's a must read because easy to read, storytelling, relevant and practical, so you can use the ideas in the book to make yourself better. So that's my top tip. Darryl, what's your top tip?
My top tip for the audience today is always be aware of your situation. Always be aware of the inflection that comes in your business, in your career, in your ministry, in your life, and recognize the need to change if it happens, because that's the first and most important step in repositioning and in the 5 essential steps to build a compelling case for change. And if you don't get that right, and if you don't see that, you can waste a lot of time and effort and become very frustrated and never get to where you were created to get to and do what you created to do. And I think, Mark, one of the most miserable circumstances that anyone could find themselves in is to be 10, 15, 20, 30 years into a business, ministry, career, or life and look back and realize they've been on their own path and they missed the opportunity that they didn't recognize years ago. So I always say be humble, be collaborative, listen to mentors, but be mindful and aware of the flags and crossroads and signs that you come across in life. And if you see one that says change, take it seriously and get ready to shift gears in the crossroads.
It's a brilliant way to finish the podcast. Darryl, thank you so much for taking part.
And thank you, Mark. I appreciate your time so much today.